Hello and welcome to the Times of India. I am Sanjeev Singh. Finally, the economic survey is out, and as expected, it predicts good growth for the Indian economy. It seems that India has finally left the ghosts of demonetization and GST behind. To discuss more about this, we've got a panel of experts. We've got Sanjeev Shankaran, who tracks political economy for the Times of India. We've also got Times of India's infrastructure editor, Surajit Gupta. And of course, we also have a special guest, Mr. D.K.Joshi, joining us from the ratings agency CRISIL. He joins us over the video conferencing line. I'll go to Sanjeev first. Sanjeev, the key takeaways according to you from the Eco survey?
The key takeaway, the one number that everybody looks for is the forecast for the next year's growth rate, which according to the Ministry of Finance, India is expected to grow between, they've given a range, not a precise point forecast. The range is 7 to 7.5% in 2018-19, which will be faster than this year, where they think the economy in 17-18 will grow at 6.75%, which is a little more than what the Ministry of Statistics had forecast a month earlier.
Okay.
So that's the highlight, if one can put it.
So, Surajit, you've got a question?
I've got a question for DK. DK, if you could just tell us your assessment of the growth estimates that the survey does, and also about the 10 new facts that it talks about India.
Well, I think as far as the growth is concerned, I would agree with the range, but I would say that instead of, unlike last year where the lower end of the range was achieved, this time the higher end of the range will be achieved. Our own forecast is slightly higher than this, 7.6%. The economy will get the benefit of weak base. The last 2017-18 was an underperformance. On top of that, there is bank recapitalization, which is progressing, and then the economy could not benefit from the global uptick in trade and growth. And this year, I think, because the demonetization impact is fading and also GST glitches, particularly for exporters, are getting ironed out, we will take better advantage of the global growth environment. So if I put all these things together, it tells you that the growth is going to be higher in 2018-19, and we do expect the upper end of this range, which is 7 to 7.5, being achieved.
Surajit, as Mr. Joshi and Sanjeev have been saying, what do you think are the key factors that are actually fueling this prospects of growth?
The economy, the data is improving. We have a global recovery which is taking place. Exports are doing well. The ghosts of demon, as you said, and GST are behind us. So there are several positive factors which are working for the economy, and that's why this optimistic picture, and which I think can be achieved, as DK says, and as the survey points out.
Okay, we'll bring Mr. Joshi in again. I'd like to go back to Sanjeev. Sanjeev, these figures, the focus. I mean, firstly, can you tell us the difference between real GDP growth and total growth?
Okay, the real GDP growth is after accounting for inflation. So normally that's the number we keep talking about. So the 6.75% that they've mentioned is after adjusting for inflation. And their forecast for next year, 7 to 7.5%, is also after adjusting for inflation. So henceforth, when we refer to GDP, we will refer to real GDP growth.
Okay.
Now
this,
this is the data from the beginning of the NDA regime. So the first year of NDA regime was 7.5%. It went up to 8% the next year. Then you had that fall the year that demonetization took place, and then you had the year after that, where they actually forecast it to be a little more than what the statistical survey, what the Ministry of Statistics said. Now, at this point, I just want to go back to Mr. Joshi. We are in the midst of the most broad-based growth seen since 2010, but it would appear that India probably missed out a bit of it last year because of all the disruption. We kind of decoupled. The survey says we decoupled from the global economy. Would you like to just tell us something about that, and also how do you see the global growth itself? Though IMF has forecast this year will be a good year, what do you feel will happen?
Well, I think if you look at the correlation of India's GDP growth with the advanced countries, every time I think advanced countries have grown above their trend, India has also grown above the trend. 2017 was the first year in last 20 years. Because of domestic disruptions, the growth fell below the trend, whereas the advanced countries were growing higher than the trend value. Now, 2018 is also going to be a good year in terms of global growth. The IMF has notched up the number to 3.9%, and on top of that, global trade is also growing. Despite so much rhetoric on protectionism, the trade is growing fast. So I think this is a unique opportunity to take advantage of, and this is going to continue for 2 to 3 years maximum, because after that the global growth will peter off and the protectionist measures which we are seeing, I think, will take hold. So I think this tactically, I think we need to take measures to take advantage of this global environment.
That's an important point that Mr. Joshi is making, that despite protectionism, trade is growing. We'd just like to tell our viewers that if you have any questions or queries, you can write to us and we'll answer them real time. Surajit, trade, the growth of trade, how important is it in the Indian context?
No, it's a very important thing, because if trade grows, we are talking already of an export-led growth strategy. So for that, exports have to improve, and then companies benefit. So it's a very huge improvement if the global economy, if the demand for our goods increase in the global economy. It's a huge advantage. And if you look at the past few years, the global demand was very tepid, and that's why you saw the kind of decline in export that we have seen.
Okay, coming back to Sanjeev. Sanjeev, the next point, that the much talked about point, is the 10 new facts of the Indian economy. Are there any specific points that you would like to pick and tell us why it's important?
Well, this is the first point. The large increase in registered indirect and direct taxpayer base is important because at some point in time, the economic survey also says that all the steps taken to formalize the economy not only increase the direct taxpayer and the indirect taxpayer base, you also had, they've actually tried to, work out the extent of extra revenue that has come to the government because of all this. Now, this also ties into something that we need to ask Mr. Joshi, because this ties into the fiscal deficit. This year, the expenditure is rising fairly fast. And there are two aspects from this, Mr. Joshi, that we wanted to ask you. One, the economic survey, when we look at the monthly GST collections, in the recent past, there has been a feeling that it's running a little, it's below expectation. Whereas the economic survey tries to annualize it, and it says that it's actually GST is done fairly well in terms of buoyancy. And we'd just like you to link that to the other aspects and just tell us what you think will be the fiscal position next year. Because the budget, this is the last full budget too.
Well, I think as far as the GST collections are concerned, I think we need to wait a little, because the tax rates are changing on a monthly basis. I mean, so they are yet to step. So it's very difficult to take a call on whether we are collecting enough taxes or not. For that, taxes have to stabilize. But I mean, having said that, when I look into the next year, I would say that both direct and indirect tax collections will improve, will perform better than the fiscal 2017-18, because one, the growth is lifting. I think that itself will increases the revenue buoyancy. And second, I think as the GST rates stabilize, I think we'll see a positive implication on that on the tax collection. And third, I think the good thing about GST is that it gives an impetus to the direct tax collections also, right. Because once you are in the GST net, I think you entered the formal economy in some sense. And I think so direct tax collections also get a fillip. So what has happened is number of taxpayers has increased, and I think also the tax collections are likely to go up. I mean, and direct tax collections have particularly done well. This has been the experience of many other economies which introduced goods and services tax. They saw the spillover effects on the direct taxes as well. So I think for next year, given the expenditure needs of the government, I think they will have to push the pedal hard on overall taxes. But I think beyond that, they will have to focus on non-tax revenue as well, which is divestment, etc. So I think it's going to be, if they want to keep the deficit under control, of course.
Before we move to from taxes to GST, we'll just take some comments coming in. Shashi Nair says that employment generation is very important. One of them has said that yes. Hamza says Acche Din, but only for corporates. Archana Nigam is asking ki, what about agricultural growth? Pranav Jha says employment is a serious concern. Agriculture trend needs to be changed. If statistics and graphs could remove poverty, wow. So there are a lot of questions as far as agriculture is concerned. Surajit, would you like to take that question about agriculture?
Yeah, in fact, these are the key areas that the survey talks about. You know, it talks about employment, finding good jobs for the young, the education sector, reforming the education sector, agriculture, raising farm productivity. So these are the reform agenda that the survey talks about, and these are issues that the government will definitely try and address in the budget that we have in 2 days' time. And these are like not short-term issues; these are medium to long-term issues. It's work in progress. It's not going to yield results overnight. But yes, these have been flagged. These are the three issues which have been flagged. And DK, if I could come to you and ask you about the other reform agenda that this survey talks about privatization, shrinking unviable banks, and greater private sector participation. How do you think the government will move ahead on this in this next year?
Well, I think one thing that everyone is awaiting is that one is that you need to front load. You've already front loaded recapitalization of bank. You have to carry it through. And along with it, I think you need to initiate reform so that this kind of situation doesn't arise again. I mean, so you reform, make the public sector banks strong enough to, and I think competitive enough, and so that they take their decisions in a more rational manner, and we don't have this kind of NPA problem again. So I think reform agenda is very critical now. I think that's the last leg of this bank recapitalization. And as far as privatization is concerned, I think we have been talking about it for a long time. But I think in 2017-18, government has managed to divest quite substantially, I would say. But I think there is a limit to the government assets that you have and how much you can get out of divestment. I think from a broader perspective, it is more important to get the private sector into some of the activities which I think which have to deal with agriculture, which have to deal with irrigation and many other things where government is putting in all the resources right now.
Mr. Joshi, one of the expectations of the forthcoming budget is that there will be a strong agriculture focus. Now, the survey actually has some negative observations about Indian agriculture. One being that real revenue has not really grown in the last 3-4 years. And second, and this is the more serious one, where they said in the medium term, climate change impact is already showing up in Indian agriculture, which can actually lead to probably a fall in income. What do you think, what is the best possible option that a central government has at this point in time?
Well, I think agriculture is more of a state subject, and I think central government can commit some resources and give some direction. But I think they have to be, as far as the trade policy is concerned, I think they should ensure that the import prices do not fall below the MSP. I think then the farmer clearly loses out. Second, I think they can ensure that if MSP is announced, at least they go in for go whole hog on procurement of whatever you have committed. So I think these things will help the farmer in the short run. But I think agriculture issues will take a long time to get sorted out, because I think many of them are structural in nature, and structural issues cannot be sorted out in a day. I mean, they have to do with, and as far as the climate change is concerned, I think we are noticing that the weather is becoming more and more unpredictable, and I think it has a material influence on agriculture. And I think the one way to hedge against it is to create enough buffer from irrigation. I mean, particularly if the rains are faltering again and again, if you have an irrigation buffer, at least you are protected to some extent. I mean, there could be other weather-related problems which might require a different kind of a solution. But at least, to me, I think irrigation is one area where we need to push really hard, and that doesn't mean big dams, etc. But that means ensuring that even with little resources, you are able to water more area, which I think the technology exists, and I think we need to focus more on that.
We'll just take some more comments before we move ahead. Sarathi Jagdish says employment is a serious concern, and the second one is to save the farmers. Vijay Ram says only on paper, don't fool the people. Satyajit Shukla, agricultural growth was always bad. Ashok Azad asks how many jobs created in agriculture sector in the last 4 years, and Asim says Indian economy was always growing at the right pace since 1991. Only the note ban and GST were the mess. Moving away from all that, we've got some interesting stats I'd like to bring in, Sanjeev. It's about gender equality, and there seems to be some major changes in it. If you look at the number of women earning more or than equal to the husband, that has really shot up. It has gone up to almost from 21.2% to 42.8%.
Right. Yeah.
How do you see these sort of things impacting the society as a whole?
The survey does give a lot of space to the position of women, because they are it's very difficult to sustain growth beyond a point in time unless more of them are not part of the workforce.
Okay.
And you do see, and they've tried different methods to bring out things like attitudes through surveys and other hard data. And by and large, you do see a greater acceptance of their role in society, and particularly the workforce. So that's a positive aspect. But talking about the workforce, there is another aspect. Mr. Joshi, the survey tries to come up with an estimate of the formal sector employment. I mean, they're not talking about year-on-year growth or anything. They just try to come up with a snapshot, if you like, of formal sector employment. Are you surprised by the size of the formal sector? Because it seems a little bigger than what most of us were led to believe. They've used social security data and also income tax data. The numbers don't match, but it does seem a little bigger than we thought it would be.
Yeah, I think it is a lot bigger than what we thought. I think the earlier committees estimated the formal sector at much smaller part of the economy. So I think this does come as a surprise. But I think as we get more and more information, I think we should use it to get to more reliable statistics. I mean, I don't have any specific comment on the size of the formal sector as displayed by the economic survey, but I would say that I think this is something worth exploring further. I mean, and this would still be in work in progress. I think you need a more robust measure of the size of the formal economy.
Okay, we're running out of time. I'd just like to take one last question from all of you, gentlemen. The top 3 pros and the cons of what do you think the economy is headed?
Well, clearly the economy is headed, as you mentioned, it's headed for robust growth, inflation, relatively low inflation, and but there are challenges. Oil prices, the economic survey has flagged oil prices as a concern, and if they rise, there'll be a big concern for the economy. But overall, as of now, it looks it's cruising.
Mr. Joshi, your final words, the pros and cons?
Well, I think the good news is that the economy is looking up. I mean, the short-term indicators also show that, and I think the worry, I think to me, major worry right now is more on the oil front, because that can actually, if it spikes and goes above 80 or so and stays there, it's going to spoil our macroeconomic story. And I think the other worry is on the GST front. I think there are still some glitches which are getting sorted out, but if it takes time, I think then that will delay our recovery, and also delay our ability to take advantage of the strong global outlook that we are seeing.
Thank you. Sanjeev, your final words?
Since we've already done with oil and GST, I'd just like to flag 2 things that the survey has brought out. That's the medium-term challenge, and I don't think we should take it lightly. One is agriculture, the impact on climate change. The other thing is they brought out the education aspect, and I think that's a serious challenge India faces, particularly with the way work is changing because of the advent of technology. And for any government, this one, next one, that's going to be a very serious challenge.
Okay, so on that note, I'd like to thank everyone. Thank you, Mr. Joshi, Surajit, and Sanjeev for joining us on this discussion. So, on the whole, it seems to be a positive year ahead for the Indian economy, provided certain things remain stable. And we're all looking forward to the union budget this time, and hope that rather than having a populist budget, it is a budget that actually, deals with all the practical issues and ensures that India is back on track as it was till 2 years ago. Thank you so much for watching the Times of India, but do tune in for live updates.